Hello, welcome in. Today I just want to talk about some of the books that I've read recently, and there's been a lot, so this is probably going to be two parts. But the first book that I want to talk about was actually a recommendation from one of my friends from class. The book is called The Master Margarita, and it's by Mikhail Bulgakov, and I loved this. This was so interesting. Like, it's really weird and funny in this satirical way that it's talking about serious things, but it has this like kind of surrealist, I would say like a magical realism situation. The plot, we follow two different storylines. One of them is set in 1930s Moscow, and basically the devil comes to Moscow and he's just this wacky, mischievous guy, and him and his demons are all there to just sow chaos and cause bad things to happen. One of his companions is this human-sized talking black cat named Behemoth, who I just think is the best character I've ever read in a book ever. And then the other storyline that we follow is in Jerusalem during the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and we follow it through the point of view of Pontius Pilate, who was the Roman like governor or whatever, who was overseeing Christ's trial. And we really just see the like bureaucratic administrative absurdity of all of this, and we see that in the Moscow storyline as well. And like I said, it is a pretty satirical look on a lot of things, you know, about life in Soviet Russia, and I'm sure that a lot of it went way over my head because I don't know that much about Soviet Russian history and stuff, but I feel like it's one of those books that I'm gonna love to come back to, and you know, you learn a little bit more in between every time you read, and so every reread I think is gonna be like a different experience. And yeah, I loved this. And then because I loved that recommendation so much, I decided to read another recommendation from the same friend, which was Possession by A.S. Byatt. We start off following this main character, this guy who is like an academic scholar who studies the work of this Victorian poet named Randolph Ashe. And one day he comes across these previously undiscovered love letters between Ashe and another writer named Christabel Lamotte, who was like really big in feminist circles. She's like a female writer from the Victorian times. These are both made up writers, by the way. They don't exist in real life. They're just in this book, which I think is really interesting and really cool. And basically, the guy gets in contact with another scholar who is an expert on Lamotte, and they together go on this journey of like tracking down these love letters and trying to figure out what was going on between these two writers and why. And so we're kind of following, you know, these two scholars going on this journey, but we're also following the story of these two writers and their love story as it's uncovered. And throughout the book, we're also getting to see some excerpts of the writer's work, which again, these are not real writers. This is all made up. A.S. Byatt did all of it. Like, it was just really, really cool. And I think for me, especially right now, doing my master's degree, being involved in the academic world, this whole thing was just super, super interesting to me. So I really liked this and highly recommend it. And speaking of the academic world, I also read a few really good books for class. I don't want to talk about everything I read for class, but there were just a few things that really stood out to me that I really enjoyed. And one of those I read for my modernism class, and that was The Waves by Virginia Woolf, which took me by complete surprise because I've never really vibed with modernism and like the whole stream of consciousness thing. I'm not a fan. In fact, I would say that I'm a hater, a certified hater of stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness is the worst writing style. Like, I hate it so much and I wish it didn't exist. Because I just, honestly, you guys, I hate stream of consciousness. Written in stream of consciousness, which I absolutely hate. And I hate reading it. I really, really, truly do. And it's like, it's a good book plot-wise, story, like character, story, it's all great, but like the writing style, I just can't do it. So I was really not expecting to enjoy this because this is like one of her most experimental, most stream of conscious-y. I thought I was gonna hate it. I ended up loving it. Like, I have all of these pages marked of moments that just really struck me emotionally. I cried during this book multiple times. It really, I don't know, it hit me really hard, and I feel like I understand stream of consciousness now. Basically, we're following the lives of 6 friends who are growing up together from their like toddlerhood into their adulthood, and we're inside each of their minds in a stream of consciousness style throughout, you know, all of these varying periods of their lives, and we see them developing as individuals, but also this kind of group identity, that they're one collective being as a group as well, and the way that they perceive each other and perceive the world and perceive themselves in the context of one another. it's just really, really good. Virginia Woolf did something to me here. And then another really, really fun, amazing, wonderful class that I took this semester, which doesn't even in my mind count as doing school or doing work, because it was just such a delight to my heart. Like, I loved it so much. Was a class on the use of sentimentality in popular posthumanism. So we were looking at media that deals with posthumanism, like non-human creatures, cyborgs, stuff like that, but the way that it uses very human emotions to convey its story and kind of play on the audience's sentimentalities. So for example, we watched season 1 of Westworld on HBO, which is a show that I already loved. It's basically about this Wild West theme park that people can go and live out all their Wild West fantasies, and it's populated by androids that resemble humans in every way possible, but they're programmed basically to be the characters in this theme park. But the problem is that some of them are starting to become sentient. So this is a really good show. Loved it. Loved talking about it in class. In that class, we also read some novels. The first one that I want to talk about is called The Blood of the Vampire by Florence Marryat, which was written in the 1800s, and it is so interesting. It is about this woman who has recently moved to England from the Caribbean. She is biracial. Her father was English and she's inherited his fortune and stuff. So now she's trying to fit in English society and make a place for herself. And then this doctor shows up and basically tells everyone this woman is a energy vampire, just like Colin Robinson from What We Do in the Shadows. Basically, like, she doesn't drink people's blood, but her presence around them sucks their energy and their life force. And the sad thing about this is that she doesn't know that. Like, the doctor reveals this information to her and she's heartbroken because she's like, oh my God, that's why so many people that I've been close to throughout my life have died. It's my fault. I'm a vampire. I'm a monster. But at the end of the day, as readers, there is kind of this question, like, is the doctor actually a reliable source of information? Is he just making this up? And there's no way to really know. It's like a really sad, sentimental, but the sentimentality really jumps out. You know what I mean? And my independent study group really enjoyed this book, and we liked looking at, you know, the way that that sentimentality and the non-human aspects of this really play into societal issues of the time period. Things like racism, xenophobia, homophobia, misogyny, stuff like that. So we ended up doing our independent study project on this book, as well as another vampire book from the same time period called Carmilla. I've read this before, I loved it. And I think what's really interesting about it is that the vampire in the story is a teenage girl, and her victim is also a teenage girl, and they have this bond, this relationship, like they're really close friends, but it's also homoerotic at times. And again, the sentimentality of that kind of jumps out. Like, you have a really emotional story. And yeah, I loved doing our group projects on these books. They were so good and we had so many interesting conversations. Another book that we read in this class that I thought was really interesting was The Island of Dr. Moreau. I've never read this before, but it is like a sci-fi classic, of course. Basically, this man ends up on an island in the middle of the ocean where there is a mad scientist there doing experiments and vivisection on the animals on the island and making them into humans. And so the island is full of all of these half human, half animal hybrid creatures. It was really interesting. I don't think that this is a book that I loved so much or anything like that, but I am glad that I read it because I know that there's a lot of really cool like film adaptations and spin-offs that I'm really excited to read. I know Silvia Moreno Garcia has one called The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which I would love to see what she does with this, because the original book is already so like infused with the Gothic, which you know that I love. That's like my thing. And Silvia Moreno Garcia also, she's got a good track record with me for stuff like that. So I'm excited to be able to read this with a full understanding now. Anyways, those are all of the for school university reading list books that I wanted to talk about. So back to the for fun, for pleasure books. I did read some Penguin Teen arcs that I got from Penguin Teen that are coming out soon. I'll start off by talking about the favorite one of them all, which was The Narrow by Kate Alice Marshall. Kate Alice Marshall is doing great things for me in the book world, and this book is just another addition to her streak of doing awesome things. It's set at a boarding school, and there is a river behind the school called the Narrow, and it's really dangerous. Lots of people have drowned there. No one who's fallen into the river has ever survived, except for one girl. Her name is Delphine, but ever since she came out of the river, she is really sick. And so she has to live in this isolated, quarantined, airlocked dorm. And when this book starts off, the boarding school administration has requested / forced our main character to go live in this dorm with Delphine and be her roommate and her companion for the year, which the main character is sad about not getting to do her senior year with her friends, but she's also really curious and she wants to know what is going on and what actually happened to Delphine the night she fell in the river. I loved this so much. The atmosphere and the vibes of like a haunted boarding school with all of these ghost stories and urban legends about the river and people who have drowned there. But then I also think the book has a really deep undercurrent, no pun intended, to it. It does deal with some deeper topics within this like creepy ghost story, and it's also got sapphic relationships, which I always love. So I don't know, I just loved this and I love this author so far. The next Penguin Teen arc that I read was Holly Horror, which comes out on the 15th. It's a more kind of fun, more campy kind of ghost story, I think. It's about this teenage girl who her parents just got divorced, and her mom and her brother go to live in Hobby House, which is a house that's been in their family, but it's been abandoned, kind of sitting empty because some tragic things have happened there. So our main character moves in with her family, and of course, supernatural, ghosty, haunty things start happening, and it's just a lot of fun. Again, I think that it does try to touch on some deeper topics like mental health and like the processing of trauma as a teenager growing up. I don't know if they were done super well. I think that the horror elements of the story were done so well. The creepy visual imagery and the vibes and everything were really good. And then I also really enjoyed that the main character has the hobby of sewing, which I think is really unique. You don't often see characters with sewing as their hobby. I just really appreciated the sewing girly representation. So yeah, this was fun and I liked it. And the last Penguin Teen arc that I want to talk about is called Suddenly a Murder by Lauren Munoz. This comes out September 5th. I did not like this one as much as I thought that I would. The premise sounded really cool. It was compared to like Knives Out. It's about a group of friends who are all graduating from their very wealthy, fancy, rich kid high school, and to celebrate their graduation, they have rented a mansion on a private island to have a 1920s themed graduation party for like a week. But the festivities are cut short when one of them ends up murdered. And nobody knows who did it, and investigators show up, the detectives are trying to solve the case, and everybody's kind of trapped on this island. Again, it sounded really cool. I think that for me, the setup of the plot and like the point of view and the writing style didn't make me feel like I was trying to figure out a mystery. I don't know how to describe it because I don't want to give any like spoilers, but the point of view that we start things off from really makes it unclear about whether or not you already know who the murderer is. So I was like, am I supposed to be suspicious of other people, right? Am I supposed to be deciphering clues or like paying attention to the investigation? Because I genuinely thought that we already knew. And then also just the way that the investigation was playing out. Basically the point of view character is just eavesdropping on the detectives while they interview all the other people, and you follow the whole investigation that way, which is like, okay, it was interesting, but it's also not the most fun way to collect clues and get to the bottom of things. You know what I mean? I don't know. It was just not all that I hoped it would be, but it was still fun, and I would still recommend it if you think it sounds interesting. And then the last book that I want to talk about in this video, I did like. Let's end on a positive note, and that was The Girl Who Speaks Bear by Sophie Anderson. This is like a middle grade fantasy story. I believe it's based on Russian folklore. I don't know if it's based on a specific folktale or anything like that, or if it's just a made-up one, but it is set in like a magical Russian type world. Baba Yaga is here, you know what I mean? And it is about a young girl who grew up in a village, and one day she wakes up and she has bare legs, and she doesn't know what's happening to her, but she thinks it has to do with the fact that she was found as a baby in a bear cave and then taken in by someone in the village to raise. So again, she's like, I don't know what's going on, but maybe that has something to do with it, and I'm gonna go into the forest and find out about my past and my real parents and like why I have bare legs now. And it was really, really good. It was magical and whimsical, and there's just like so much fairy tale folklore stuff. And then another thing that I really like, at first I was kind of upset that I had to buy a physical copy of this book because my library doesn't have it, but when it came in, the physical copy is actually so cute. Like, it has so many like fully illustrated pages, and then a lot of the other pages have these cute like borders on them. It's just really, really cute. I honestly was just gonna read this book and then donate it, but I think I'm gonna keep it because this is just like a really nice book, and I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was so fun and so cute, and I'm really glad that I got to read it. This is actually part of a completely randomized TBR. Like, this was on my Goodreads TBR, but I don't think that I ever would have actually picked it up or gotten to it, but it was randomly selected. I did a randomized TBR and this got put on it, and I'm so grateful for that because I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. So anyways, those are all of the books that I read recently that I'll talk about in this video. I will do a part 2, so keep an eye out for that. I would love to hear from you in the comments what you've been reading recently, or if you've read any of these, if you liked them, or what your thoughts were. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that I'll get to talk to you soon. Bye!